My name is Kim from the Pennington Public Library. Thank you again for joining us this afternoon for our Immigration Experiences discussion panel. This conversation is brought to you in partnership with the Pennington Public Library, the Hopewell Valley Historical Society, and the Hopewell Museum. It's part of our 2022 NEA Big Read, which seeks to bring together our community around one book, in this case, the graphic memoir, The Best We Could Do, and to use this shared experience to explore the book's many themes, one of which is immigration. NEA Big Read is a program of the National Endowment for the Arts in partnership with Arts Midwest. And special thanks goes out to the Hopewell Branch of the Mercer County Library for being our viewing party host. Before we start, I wanted to let you know if you have any questions during the program, please write them into the Q&A section. We'll be trying to address them at the end of the program, but perhaps some of them within the program as well during our discussion with the help of our Q&A moderator, Kat Hogan. So thank you so much, Kat. Now I would like to turn this over to Bob Warsnack from the Hopewell Museum, who has a few words. Bob, are you there?
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Bob Warsnack. I'm the co-chairperson of the Joint Program Committee, and I represent the Hopewell Museum. Bob Lawless is the co-chairperson for the Hopewell Valley Historical Society. For the museum board, I serve as secretary, and I also am on the Hopewell Valley Historical Society board as the first vice president. I'm very pleased once again to be able to partner with our friends at the Pennington Public Library and to support their effort on their Big Read grant. We are always grateful to have a partnership with other local organizations that have an interest in our community's shared history. We are thrilled to have the ability to continue to share these programs with the public, even if it is still through virtual tools like Zoom. As you may be aware, the museum has been closed due to COVID. Although we have reopened to allow researchers to schedule appointments, we look forward to being fully open and being able to share our exhibits with you in the near future. Prior to COVID, we started our renovation process. We are currently in the process of reevaluating our space for storage, collections, and archival space. And we hope to be able to report on final plans for that in the near future. One update that I would like to share with you today is about our program facilitator, Ian Burrow. Ian is also a trustee on the museum board with me, and he has been very busy coordinating the efforts of several volunteers and our intern, Richard Fallon. We hired Richard last fall. He's a student at the College of New Jersey and is our archaeological intern. Ian and his team have been meeting once a week for the past several months, working to identify and catalog hundreds of various archaeological artifacts, including projectile points, stone gorgets, stone and ceramic tobacco pipes, arrow smoothers, and other flakes tools such as scrapers, chisels, and drills, plus some unusual ground stone tools. To give you an idea of the age of some of the artifacts, most of the projectile points in the collection are of types in use in the late and terminal archaic periods, which were about 3,000 to 6,000 years ago. The next time you see Ian, be sure to ask him about this exciting project. And thank you again, Kim.
Welcome to today's panel discussion. My name is Bob Lawless. As Bob Warsnack indicated, I co-chair the Joint Program Planning Committee with him as a representative of the Hopewell Valley Historical Society. The Society, in collaboration with Hopewell Museum, is very honored to support the Pennington Public Library's Big Read program with today's presentation. Today's program is a departure from our usual format, but I must say I'm very excited about the opportunities this type of program has to offer the community. I would like to thank all of the panelists for their generosity in sharing their experiences with us. I would also like to extend my gratitude and appreciation to all the dedicated people who have worked tirelessly to put this program together. The Historical Society strives to produce programs for the community that are both relevant and insightful. These programs would not be possible without the contributions made by all those involved. We are fortunate to have been able to accomplish this goal on a monthly basis throughout our recent health crisis and continue with this tradition and intend to continue with this tradition in the future. So please check our website regularly for new program announcements. Know that the society is an integral part of the community. We depend upon the continued support and contributions from our community. I would like to extend an invitation to any of you that may be interested in supporting the society through membership or contributions to please contact us. Thank you each for your attendance in today's program. I hope you do enjoy what I anticipate to be a very enlightening program. And now I'd like to introduce the moderator for today's program, Mr. Ian Burrow.
Thank you, Bob. Good afternoon, everybody. Yes, my name is Ian Burrow, and I'm the facilitator, which means I'm supposed to make things easy, which I will certainly try to do. Just to reinforce something that Kim said, those of you who are on Zoom, we're encouraging you to write comments in the Q&A or comments in the chat bars, and Kat will be observing those and reviewing them, and we will try to include as many of those that are, push the conversation forward as we can. I'd ask, and it's sad that I have to ask this, I suppose, but I do ask everyone to keep comments or questions respectful. I'm sure everybody will do exactly that. So before I introduce our panelists, I have the floor, so I thought I'd have a chance to share my immigration experience a little bit. I'm an immigrant. I came to this country in my late 30s from England, where I was born, grew up, and was educated. And I have realized over the years that my experience, unsurprisingly, I suppose, is very privileged in terms of immigration. Firstly, I'm white. Second, I speak English. Thirdly, I got a PhD. Fourthly, I'm married to a US citizen. And fifthly, I had a job to come to. And I know that's going to be different from a lot of people's experiences. And I do recognize that it's that it is an experience of privilege. And so I'm going to be looking forward to hearing other people's experiences. So we're going to have four questions, which we hope are very open-ended, and we will invite the panel to respond to. It'll be about sort of 15 minutes per question. So we'll go just over an hour or so. And I think if the conversation is going well, we may continue it a little bit, but no longer than an hour and a half anyway. Let me see, I have missed anything else out. I want to thank our panelists again and everyone who's on Zoom and on live stream at the Pennington Mercer County Library. That's great that you're there. And so what we're going to do now is to tantalize you a little by introducing our panel one by one. As I mentioned their names, they're going to unmute and turn their video on and give us about a quick 30 seconds of introduction about what they want you to know about why they are participating in this panel and perhaps what they want to get out of it and a little more background. So we're going to do this in alphabetical order, keeping everything very orderly here. So I'd like to invite David Angwenyi to unmute and put his video on and give us 30 seconds of his life, as it were.
Thank you so much, Ian. My full names are David, and the second name is Matara, and the last name is Angwenyi. And I give you all the three names to also signify the immigrant experience. I come to this conversation for a number of reasons. First, of my own immigration experience. Second, for my very interest in also creating an immigration experience for American students, kind of turn them to a place where they need to experience immigration in a very short term. So that's how I come here. And I'm looking forward to engaging, and the experience by T. Pui's book mirrors very much my own experience in a number of ways. Thank you very much.
Okay, now actually before one thing I did forget. I hope many of you, I think, on the audience have probably encountered this book, but if you haven't, I strongly encourage you to read it. It's graphic novel. It's the first one I'd ever read. And of course, it informs our conversation today. Anyway, so moving on, I'd like to invite Ellyn Ito to unmute and video herself and give us her 30 seconds.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. I'm honored to be here. The reason why I am here is because I feel it is incredibly important to have a dialogue among people around the immigrant experience, particularly centered around things like historical societies and museums and authors of different voices, women authors, diverse authors. I myself am fourth generation Japanese American, which means my family immigrated here in the late 1800s, but I'm forever seen in certain circles as an immigrant. The question always comes up, where are you from? And when I say, well, I'm from Hopewell now, everyone looks at me quizzically. So this conversation, it's a joy to be a part of and a joy to be able to provide perspective and hear other perspectives.
Thank you very much, Ellyn. And now I'd like to move on to Mikaela Evans and ask you, Mikaela, to unmute and video yourself. Hello, there you are.
Thanks, Ian. Hi, everybody. My name is Mikaela Evans. I use she, her pronouns. And I am from Kingston, Jamaica, living in the Titusville section of our wonderful area with my family, 3 daughters and a husband. They're in the schools, the elementary, Bear Tavern and Timberlane. And I come to the conversation, I think, as someone who moved here after marrying an American citizen, but came to college here as an international student. And so what I found interesting about the book was that there was a universality of the different elements that the author talks about with regard to otherness and belonging and all of that. So excited to hear from my fellow immigrant and immigrant adjacent folks in the neighborhood. Also, I think that in terms of experience, as Ellyn said, I can probably pass until I start speaking. And then usually people can pick up that I'm an immigrant and ask about where I'm from. So that in and of itself is interesting.
Colby Cedar Smith. Colby, can you unmute and visualize yourself? Thank you.
Hello. I'm so happy to be here today. I'm Colby Cedar Smith, and thank you so much to all the organizers, and I'm super excited to be here. I live in Hopewell, Burrow, and I am also a mother of 2 kids who are in the school district, the Hopewell Valley School District at Hopewell Elementary in Timberlane. I'm a poet, a novelist, and an educator at the Arts Council of Princeton. And I also am doing a residency this May with Helen Corvaline at Hopewell Elementary to teach poetry and nature to 4th graders. And I just published my first book, which is, I'm going to hold it up. It's called Call Me Athena, Girl from Detroit. And I am not an immigrant, but Call Me Athena is based on my grandmother, Mary Scandalaris's life. She was the daughter of Greek and French immigrants in Detroit, Michigan in the 1930s. And it's really based on the stories that I heard from her growing up that totally enraptured me. And I grew up listening at her feet. And so I'm just going to tell my family's stories today. And I really come to this discussion as a writer and really deeply identified with T. Bowie's book and also her mission to be a story keeper and a record keeper for her family while searching for intergenerational healing. And as she says, and I'd like to quickly quote her, I keep looking toward the past, tracing our journey in reverse, over the ocean, through the war, seeing an origin story that will set everything right. And this was really one of the main missions for my writing my book as well. So I am so honored to be here, and I'm really looking forward to hearing everyone's stories.
I'm calling on Uma Purandare to come on and unmute and video herself and introduce herself.
Thank you, everybody. And I would really like to thank the organizers, particularly the Kim and Catherine, for giving me this opportunity to to share my immigration experience to our resident in Hopewell, Pennington, Titusville, around surrounding the area. And I am a first-generation immigrant from India. I came here chasing my American dream. My husband got a postdoctoral position opportunity here, and I just tagged along with him and created myself a space here in this community, in this society. I've been Hopewell resident for past 23 years. My kids both grown up, a daughter and a son. They also attended Hopewell, wonderful Hopewell schools. And I'm looking forward to share my experiences, how I have been accepted in this society, and looking forward for the exciting discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Well, that's our wonderful panel. And so now I'm going to feed them the 4 questions that we have. These are, each question has a context, which is based on an incident in the book. And then we lead on to there with the specific question. And
Hey, Ian.
yes.
Hi, it's Kim. Can I interrupt?
Of course you can.
Oh, I was just going to say I was hoping to add a little bit of my background, if that's okay.
Oh, certainly. I'm sorry. Yes, go right ahead.
No worries. I know it's very difficult to juggle all of these different roles. And normally I am usually on the other end. Normally I'm the one moderating, Ian. So now I'm getting confused as well. What my role is. So, but I think the last time I read, I was on this panel. I'm not sure. So I'm just going to just add a little bit about what I hope to bring to the conversation. When we started this big read journey, we had a number of books to choose from, and there were, I think, 6 books, which is very small for the number of books that we normally have for a big read to choose from. And I remember seeing The Best We Could Do and almost pausing. It was almost scary for me because I read it over and it was a very personal story, and I could relate to it very well because of the fact that my parents are Vietnamese immigrants, and they came over not too long before T. Boy's parents came over to the United States. And I just, at that point, I just didn't think that it was a story that maybe this area would be interested in. I wasn't sure about it, but in writing the grant with our grant writing committee from the library and in choosing the book, our grant writing committee unanimously chose this book. So here we are, and it's been a wonderful experience, and I've just been so honored to be part of this and to hear everyone else's immigrant stories. And I hope that I can add to that voice with my experience as a first-generation American. So I wanted to say thank you, Anne.
Thank you, Kim. I'm just going to get my gallery view up again so I can see everybody. So here's the first question. The context statement runs as follows. When the author shares about San Diego being a Naval and Marine Corps base still healing from the wounds of the Vietnam War, she says that not everyone welcomed their presence. She then shares a series of images where she and her family are being horribly mistreated. So there's 2 parts to the question, really, and you can, panelists, you can take them however you want to, really. The first part is describe an experience when you and your family felt least accepted in the United States. And then to flip the coin, describe an experience when you and or your family felt most accepted in the US. Anybody want to take it away?
I'll start.
Thanks, Ellyn.
Sure. So this experience was very recent. It was right after we had shut down due to the pandemic, and we were just starting to go out to supermarkets, and I was all masked up, had a hat on, goggles. No one knew how you contracted the virus. And I was at a local supermarket. Everyone, had their carts. They were backed up in line. It was kind of confusing. And I was kind of trying to figure out where to be. And a woman looked back at me and told me to take my virus and go back to where I came from. And for me, normally I would engage with that someone, but you know, I didn't want to get too close, and I wasn't sure I heard them right. But it was something that, you know, I forget that I look like the way I look. And so it was kind of a reminder of how people see me is different than maybe how I think about myself in the world.
Great. Do you have a positive one as well, Ellyn, that you can share?
Oh, sure, yes. So the positive ones are always when we are with friends or family or a community where there are many different types of Americans from different backgrounds, where it's just natural, and we can share without feeling like we're different, so to speak. And so I find that's the case when we're in kind of metropolitan areas where there's, you know, a lot of different sorts of Americans from different backgrounds.
Yes, thanks very much. Okay, who's next? Who's up next? If you don't unmute, I'll call on somebody. I do that. David.
Yep, I'm happy to do that.
Thank you.
There is a number of experiences that will can I share, obviously, but just for the background, for those of you who do not know where I originally immigrated from, I came from Kenya, which is in East Africa. Just to give context, because often people think Africa is one country. So there's a lot of 56 countries there. Just to give context, because I get that often. And for me, one of the really encounter I had, this came out really probably at the very beginning when I came to the US about 1995, 94, there almost 20 years ago, 25 or 24 years ago. I had got a job and I was working, and I think I got some kind of injury while I was working or something like that. And then I was told to go to the emergency room for some treatment, you know, just to see a doctor. And I go to the emergency room. I'm not going to name this hospital, but I was there and I sign in myself, put everything else, you know, my name and everything else. And of course you go sit, it told you sit down and wait at the place. And I sat there, I waited, people came in, were being treated, and nobody was coming to me at all or being called at all. I went checked in and find out what's going on. You know, I mean, yeah, just wait. Having come from a place where I was used to be patient, I waited, I think probably for more than 6-7 hours. No treatment, no nothing. That was, and then it's come later on to learn, I mean, I'm putting things in perspective, learning later on what it meant, you know, like how it was perceived. Okay, it wasn't really, it was a lot more to do with who I was and the last name, things like that. And it was quite a terrifying moment. So that is something that has never gone away. And when people share the stories, now I come to, come relate with it. I did not think it like that at all, because where it come from, you did not make assumptions at all about why people did whatever they did until later on. But there have been also positive experiences, many of them, but I'd like to share one of them. Many of you probably know that I'm a teacher at the Central High School. And when I started teaching there, first of all, the school probably had, and even today, not so much, they didn't have a lot of Black teachers a lot. I think I was probably one among two, okay, in the whole school. So when I was teaching in the classroom, the first thing I thought was, students are going to be, this teacher who is speaking differently and, things like, bits like that, they're going to be, how are they going to respond? The opposite was true. There was such a positive response to me and acceptance and really wanting to learn from me that that moment that has really lifted my spirits going forward, that I, in a way that is amazing in education. So that's a very positive thing that remains, and it has actually kept me growing beyond imagination. Thank you. That's all I wanted to share with you for now.
Actually, I can share and very positive from the day one that I entered in this country almost 30 years ago. And I mean, one of those fortunate, I would say I'm one of those fortunate people, because New Jersey already had a lot of Indian immigrants, and it's like kind of awareness that you are coming from a country where there is already a population established in here. So I honestly had all positive experiences till today. It would be hard for me to pick something negative. I mean, I have heard people talking like people moving somewhere in the Midwest where the Indian population was not that common. I still get the questions if I wear some Indian cultural dresses like sari or salwar kameez or something. But I would say I'm lucky enough that I honestly enjoy and have all positive experiences being in this society, being accepted here.
Okay, Mikaela, would you like to offer some thoughts?
Sure. I'm enjoying hearing everybody. It's fascinating.
Yeah.
But my story is a little different because my family is still in Kingston, Jamaica, and I'm the only one here. And what's intriguing is seeing the way that my husband, who's African American, and I navigate raising kids who have this Jamaican heritage. And especially during the pandemic, they couldn't get back as often as they were before. And so, we got one trip in last November, but it's interesting to kind of I think the other day they were asking so are we Jamaican or what? What's our situation? But I think in terms of acceptance, it's interesting. And I keep going back to what Ellyn was saying around the visibility of your otherness. So, in the United States, if you're of European descent, like Ian, you were acknowledging, you can blend in. We also are pretty Anglophilic here. So we just love Brit accent, oh my God. But everybody else is kind of so people are trying to relate you to, I remember one guy said to me, oh, you're Jamaican. This is a professional context, y'all. I was a young executive assistant to my CEO. We're in a board meeting up in Newark. The guy goes, oh, when I hear you speak, I think of that poster of that girl in the red t-shirt coming up out of the water. I was like, ooh. So those are the kind of creepy things you get, professional context. And that's where I appreciate getting a little older and being able to kind of shut that down. But I think just to what Uma said, I've been really fortunate and privileged because in our particular part of the world, folks from where I'm from with the melodic accent and all that, it's pretty positively received. It's good vibes. Every now and again, you'll get someone saying, oh, Jamaicans are the worst. They're so lazy and awful. And I'm like, oh, I'm sorry, but generally pretty cool. Yeah. So let's see what else we unpack as we chat.
Okay, Colby, sorry, last but not least. Colby.
And also Kim after me.
Well, that's right, yeah.
So I am not an immigrant and I'm not a person of color. So this is, I cannot answer this question specifically as myself, but what I can do is relay some of the things that my grandmother told me. And as I was writing my book, as I was, going back into the history of these stories that she told me, what I tried to do was find things that were, and themes and things that happened to her that were relevant and still happening today. And it was really, so shocking to me that there were still so many things happening that she had talked about. As she was growing up in Detroit in the 1930s, she was growing up in Highland Park. And just to give that context, what gives me context as a child of the 80s and 90s is that's where Eminem grew up. It's kind of famous for that region. And so in the 30s, Detroit had been this booming industrial city. And at that point, after the economic crisis, the fall, there were humongous amounts of riots breaking out and economic disparity. No cars were being made. There were strikes. There was police brutality, much civil unrest. And so there was a grand call for immigrants to be sent home, and because they were taking American jobs, and especially at the Ford factory, which was the center of Detroit, Michigan at the time. There was fighting on the streets, which, and, families like my grandmother's family were being attacked physically, and their houses were being attacked as well. There were also, which I find this super fascinating as the history of redlining in America, there were racial covenants being embedded into property deeds that stated that no person of color or foreign-born citizens could own a home. And so this greatly affected my grandmother's family and their ability to own property. And in her neighborhood, in her late teens, there was actually a physical wall being constructed. And that wall is known as the Detroit Wailing Wall, or the 8 Mile Wall, which was meant to keep people of color and immigrants in their designated neighborhoods. And as you know, the call for building a wall against our border came up, just the fact that we were still having these discussions was shocking to me and saddening to me. And I really want to share, also my grandparents were star-crossed lovers and in a forbidden romance, and they both had to fight their families to basically have a cross-cultural relationship. My grandfather was from an American family that could trace its lineage back to the Mayflower, and they really didn't want him to marry an immigrant girl or a girl from an immigrant family. And she was actually already designated to be in an arranged marriage with a much older Greek man from their community. And so they had to really fight to be together. I also want to share on the positive side this crazy, insane story of my great grandmother, who had been in the US for years and had been struggling with horrible conditions, horrible poverty, trying to feed her 6 kids, bad healthcare, and she had lost a child, and she ended up writing a letter to the Detroit Free Press, which was actually published, about the horrible conditions for immigrants in America. And Eleanor Roosevelt read the letter, and she was known at the time for being this amazing champion for immigrant women who had children. And she actually sent a limousine to my grandmother's house in Detroit, Michigan, with a Christmas tree on the top of the limousine. Men came out of the limousine wearing full dress coats and top hats, and gave them a turkey dinner and presents for the children. And actually, Eleanor Roosevelt secured a position for my grandfather at the Ford factory, working in the foundry and pouring steel. And what is so amazing to me about that story is just the heart and the empathy and the leadership involved in, and the welcoming nature of, like, this is your country too. So I love that story, and I wanted to share that. But that's my response as a historian.
That's amazing.
Thank you so much.
That's great.
Beautiful.
You know, I thought about this question a lot, and the first question of when you feel least accepted. You know, you kind of just go back through your life, and I was born in Baltimore, Maryland, and I've lived in the U.S. all my life, and you know, in a way, you know, we all as children go through some form of bullying. I think everyone has gone through some form of bullying. And so when you talk to other people who may not be immigrants or have an immigrant background, you find a commonality. So I kept on going through these stories and thinking, well, how's that different from, you know, someone who I know who is a friend of mine who doesn't have an immigrant story, who was bullied for this, you know? And so I think we all share some of that in common. But I think my parents, being Vietnamese immigrants, and for me, and again, I don't think this is unique to myself, but for me, I felt a sense of always walking a line, like being raised in 2 cultures, essentially, and always navigating between those 2 cultures. And especially as a child, trying to understand that, being at home and being inundated with the Vietnamese culture, and then going to school and having a whole different culture. I remember when I was 5, I met this girl for the first time, my first friend in kindergarten, and we exchanged phone numbers, and I called her up, and click, she hung up on me. And I didn't understand. And I was too embarrassed to even approach her. And it wasn't until years later we ended up playing violin together and becoming friends. And I asked her, do you remember years ago when we were in kindergarten? And she looked at me and she said, but Kim, you weren't speaking English. And so it was that, it just, so I think at that point, maybe I was speaking both languages, I guess, when I didn't distinguish between one and the other. But, I've been very fortunate in my life that I felt pretty accepted in this country. And the part about not being accepted is, I think, people initially trying to understand who I am. And so I try to be open-minded about that. I realize I look different than someone who's white. And, when I was younger, it used to bother me more because I wanted to fit in more. But as I've gotten older, I just kind of accepted it more and realized, okay, I do, this is how I look. And with it comes the fact that people will ask me, they will, and they mean the best. They want to know more about me. And it's, then I take that step to inform them about, my heritage. But I have to say that in this country, I've been very fortunate. I mean, I think the one time I did feel not accepted as an American was when I went to visit vacation to Italy, where I came upon this Italian man who asked me and a friend of mine, both of us with Asian descent, he asked us, where are you from? And we both said, we're American. And he said, oh, no, where are you really from? And that's when it really hit me full force. So, and I realized, I don't think people see me as American when I'm abroad at all. So, but otherwise I feel really accepted, and especially by the Hopewell Pennington community and the library community.
Well, those are great responses. Thank you. I don't think we're going to have any awkward silences on this program. While I'm on, I got the very quick one. When I felt most unwelcome, it was my very first day working, on my first job in the US, and it was, I can remember it. It was on the Stony Brook Bridge on Route 206, just south of Princeton, and the guys were trimming the trees there, and we got talking, and one of them realized that I was English, because I was probably very English at that point, and he said, "Why the hell don't you get out of Northern Ireland?" And I thought, well, I would, but I'm not there. But and it was an Irish American reacting negatively to my Englishness. Not without cause, I must say, but really that I think is the only time, like many other of you have shared. I mean, I think I felt very welcome to this country most of the time. I really have, and I think Americans, for the most part, are generous, open people, and I think we should keep that in mind as we see the news and wonder about things sometimes. So that's great. On to question 2. Okay, as Bo and Ma set about carving out a life in California, there were setbacks. Their degrees were not recognized in the US. So despite their extensive education, they were forced to take jobs for which they were overqualified and for which they were paid very little. So here's the question: what sort of challenges or setbacks did you or your family face in building a life in the US? And what did you or your family need to leave behind and try to recreate in the US? Excuse me.
I guess I can go with that because I have a first-hand experience with that. All my education happened in India. I had a master's degree from India. But when I came here, I felt like, oh my God, where am I? And I came from a huge joint family. Like, any given day, I had like 25 people when I left 30 years ago in my family. And that was the first shock, that where have I come? And not to mention, the English was very limited at that time. I had a very difficult time communicating because that wasn't my first language. Besides, I didn't know, even though I had a master's degree, I don't know where I can go find, apply. And as you mentioned, someone told me that, oh, I have to get my degree certified or I think evaluated. And I didn't know what that process is. And it was truly a difficult time. And then, as I mentioned earlier, my husband joined Rutgers University as a postdoc. And then I was just like, he kept encouraging me that you can't sit home, you have to go find something, talk to people. So whatever my broken English a little bit at that time, I went and just met one researcher in the university, Rutgers University. And I told her that, oh my God, such a kind professor. I told her what my background, I had a degree in plant biology. And the reason I went to her particular thing was I just saw a few plants in her window there. And my best guess was, okay, she might be a plant scientist, right? So then I explained it to her, what am I, where I was. And she was kind enough and she said, well, you know what? I won't give you money at all, but you can start working in my lab and we'll see how it goes. And honestly, she didn't give me money, but what she did was she talked to all the professors in the department, the molecular biology, genetics, everything. She was teaching few courses in Rutgers University. And she said, you know what? I couldn't even afford to pay for the tuition there because postdoc salary is just even below. I don't even want to spell out, but we can barely meet the ends meet. And then I started auditing the courses without paying anything, just would go and sit, audit the courses. And she said, you can write the exams, do everything. Like that, I started my career here. Then I go another lab and got the research assistantship, and I accumulated the experience, going on my way. And I'm really proud that, over the period from the plant biology, I changed into the cell development, and now currently I'm working as a pharmaceutical research scientist. But this was a journey. It was quite amazing. And as I said earlier, I made myself a place in this society and in the kind of professional world. But I honestly relate to that experience what Taibu has explained in her book, what her parents went through. And as her, my kids are truly, truly proud of both of us that what we have came and achieved in this country.
I'll go next. Sure.
Okay.
So as mentioned, my family immigrated in the late 1800s and began building a life on the west coast of California. And they had built businesses, and when World War II happened, there was the incarceration of Japanese Americans, where they were then relocated with very little notice, 48 hours. They had to sell everything they had, or entrust it to people, and then they were sent to internment camps, where they were held for 3 years or so, depending on the camp that they were at. And so my family lost everything during that time period. And they had to rebuild coming out of the war. My mother was born in the camp. Families were split up. And this was a time when families, Japanese Americans, they were American citizens, had to make a choice. There was a questionnaire that was asked by the US government as to, and it was worded very strangely in terms of where loyalties lie. So there was a great deal of confusion that took place. What was really wonderful is following the war, the governor of Colorado kind of opened their arms to allow the resettlement of many Japanese Americans, which is where my family then relocated. But that really gave my family an opportunity to come to a place and rebuild their lives. Later on, there were some reparations that were made. This was in I think it was the 1980s, in recognition of the wrongs that were done to the civil rights of Japanese Americans. But during that time, certainly, it is a situation where, at least in my family, we wanted to show our loyalty to the US. And so my grandparents stopped speaking Japanese to my mom. And it was really all about kind of working hard, putting your head down, showing that you're a worthy citizen.
Thank you. That's
Wow.
a very moving story. Colby?
Can I go next from
Sure.
that historical connection? And to hear you talk about that, Ellyn, is so important and so eye-opening. And thank you for sharing that story. So from my family's and how my family's story and how I really connect with the story that T. Bowie was telling in her book is that my family, my great grandparents were running from countries that they couldn't return to, and because of war and hunger and loss of family. And so my family, once they got here, there was a lot of struggle with poverty and with addiction that arose dealing with that poverty and disability. My great grandfather Yorgos was a stowaway on an ocean liner from Greece. And he came to Ellis Island and was immediately put in prison because he was entering the country illegally. And he knew he couldn't return to Greece, which was where they would send him. And so he was given the opportunity to fight in World War I in the US Army in France, and he would become a naturalized citizen. So he took that choice. And my grandmother always said that he took the choice because he knew he would get 3 squares a day and he could leave his past behind. So it gave him an opening. My great grandmother lost both of her parents during the war. Her father was in the French Foreign Legion and died in Siam. He was a doctor. And so she came from this place of great privilege. She was very educated and yet lost everything during the war and was given to her aunt, who was the mother superior in a convent. And all of her family's resources were given to the convent, and she had nothing and was forced to become a nun. So she actually met my great grandfather when he was wounded in the war, and she was working in a hospital in the convent, and she decided to run away, nun on the loose, and come to America with this swarthy Greek gentleman. So they had nothing when they came, they had nothing when they were here, and they kept on scraping by. Yorgos lost both of his thumbs in the Ford factory, in the foundry, and was lost his job, and they struggled because of that disability. When my grandmother married my grandfather, he also had an accident in the Ford factory and fell down an elevator shaft and was completely blinded when my dad was 3. So they both worked so hard to manage their disabilities and support their family. And, my grandmother started a janitorial supply business because from her perspective, everyone always needs toilet paper. And it was something that she could sell, and she, took care of her child, her blind husband, and sold toilet paper. And my father was able to get educated because he joined the Air Force during the Vietnam War, and he was in Frankfurt during the Vietnam War, so not in the active fighting, but he was able to get educated because of the GI Bill, which is an amazing thing in our country. And even though I was raised solidly middle class, I was able to go to college on a Pell Grant. So I am a testament to the support that the government can give to immigrant families and give education, and it makes a huge difference in people's lives. So just one of my main learnings is that they really, just like Ellyn was saying, my family really threw themselves into becoming American. They wanted to be American. They wanted to build something here because there was nothing to go back to.
Can I follow up with what you said, Colby? So as I mentioned, my parents are Vietnamese immigrants, and I would say that, yeah, our family is definitely a testament to the support that has been given to us from the government in the US. My parents both ended up in Indiantown Gap, Pennsylvania after the war, and after, I guess, first they were in Guam. And then Indiantown Gap, which is a refugee camp in Pennsylvania. And they were assigned different sponsors, families who'd be willing to take them in, or maybe a church, right? Other people. And so my mom ended up in Ohio, in Columbus, Ohio. And my dad was in Maryland. And so they had a long distance relationship because they actually met in a refugee camp. So that's how we end up in Maryland and how I came to be. But my dad, when he was in Maryland, his sponsor brought him around to different places to find him jobs. And so they brought him to this factory. And I don't know, I just can't imagine my dad having said this, because he could be outspoken, he could have been outspoken, but pretty quiet spoken person. But he said to his sponsor, I don't do manual labor. Basically, he was an educator in Vietnam, a teacher for many years, and a principal of a school. And so his sponsor said, well, let's see what we can do for you. So my dad took computer classes and ended up working for Maryland National Bank with their computers back, this is the 70s. So it was these huge computers in these rooms, basically, and worked, for it then became, I think, Nations Bank, and then was bought up by Bank of America. So he worked for them all of his life, basically. But I laugh when I think of that story about what would he have been if he had not said something, and how many immigrants feel that they shouldn't say anything. Because I know so many of my mom's and my mom's friends, my dad's friends, who did end up working in factories. Just standing, packing cups in bags or whatnot. But I was raised with reduced lunches. We only had one car in my family. And I grew up in a little apartment where I shared a room with my brother for all my, until I moved out. And I guess with one car in the family, I was determined. We were like several miles away from my high school, but I was determined that I was going to be involved in school. So, and extracurricular activities. So I managed to talk to some of the teachers, and they would let me stay locked in the office after school until it was time to have the activity, whether it was play rehearsal, and then I would hitch a ride with a friend to get home from play rehearsal, or I had teachers drive me home. I mean, I was so supported by my friends and by my teachers. So it was just wonderful. And I remember my parents saying to me, we can't afford to put you into college, so you have to find a way, but we just can't do it. And so I was like, okay. I was like, I can't go anywhere unless I get it fully paid for me. So I was like working my butt off to get all these scholarships. And I got into our state college with a full ride, just because I was like, I'm not going unless I get a full ride, So it was just, I guess that answers, I hope that's the question about, it just builds character, I think, looking back on it now. But it was just my life. So didn't really think much about it.
Solid determination, as I can see, everybody is kind of, I can add into there that even we came here having a postdoc offer, we came with the $20 in the pocket, and my kids make fun of me. Oh, there you go, your $20 story. But that's actually a true story, because at that time we couldn't bring anything legal money from India to here, and also been raised as a middle-class child back in India. We couldn't even convert hundreds and hundreds of dollars, because currently you can see it's like 79 rupees is $1, and then it was impossible to get anything more than $20 in the pocket, and then we can create our life here.
I can go next. So first of all, this is fascinating. The fact that the commonality of the experiences that we all have, and where the stories kind of converge when you look at it. So looking at T-Boy's idea of you come in, you have all these qualifications, and then they don't mean anything, right? And it's interesting that to me, there's a lot of reference to it. I'm gonna, first of all, there's a lot of amazing things happening. So what we are sharing now here is those things that I think we all need to understand so we can kind of make things better for immigrants, make things better for others. It does not mean that there aren't good things. There are, we can spend a lot of time to speak about the amazing, great things happening. Even, my own journey, just from getting to a middle class. I see myself, that's where I am, right? Coming from with maybe like $1 then, if I say what Uma is talking about, to a place where you are now generally in the middle class or moving up. So that's a very amazing opportunity. But I want to say to me that a number of things that I saw that was quite amazing. I came from a place where I think was very open-minded. I feel like if you told me that you have a swimming pool, I tell you I have a whole river, ocean belong. That's what I hope I have. A swimming pool is so much constraining. I have this natural environment where it belongs to me, all of it. Okay, so I come to a place where I found where there was a lot of times where there was a lot of assumptions that I did not really, because I did not speak well or understand English. That kind of assumption. I remember one experience where opening a bank account where somebody would speak so loudly that do you understand English very loud. First of all, I not knowing that has that to do with my ability to understand it, and then to say with a very simple word, absolutely. That is so there's these assumptions that the fact that either you are speaking differently, you are from a different place, you do not know much, and the idea that even your level of qualifications therefore isn't at par with everybody else, and because it's not at par with whatever is here, already it sets a situation whereby right from the very start you are made to feel that you aren't equal. And that's the place we need to start understanding from. When you meet people from another background, if you take anyone to a culture where they don't speak a language, you will absolutely appear that you know nothing, right? So the fact you can't measure intelligence, understanding, just because the fact that people aren't able to communicate directly in that language they are in that particular culture they are in. That's what I saw. And it used to verbal me a lot because I knew a lot of stuff. We'll get into a classroom, let's say a math class, and then I understand the stuff, but there's this assumption that he doesn't know anything, right? All right. And I've gone to places where those kind of assumptions are made, and therefore you are not able to grow. So for me, those are the places where I found, and then there was a lot of misplaced stereotyping of experiences of others. Maybe somebody has seen somebody that looks like me, did something, then it's generalized. Okay, to every situation. Suppose I saw somebody who was white, did something bad, and then I generalized to all white people. Would that be correct? So those kind of things seem to be very present, and they were kind of pulling me back, because then you're dealing with two things. Am I learning? And then for me, it was I made a choice to come to the United States. Right? So it's a different kind of immigration experience in that perspective. And then the other thing, there was lowering of expectations, right? Kind of like, even the job-wise, it doesn't matter what the degree you're gonna get, you really don't have to worry about getting this particular position, right? You're not gonna be in that particular place. So it's very interesting for me to look at that and see how much, once you stand with courage and understand experience, then you do know that you have a lot to offer. And that's where I am like this moment. I feel like I need a lot of people to know what they are. One of the reasons why I've refused to give away my accent, I learned that that's part of my identity. And I want it actually to be, so long as you can understand what I'm saying, so long as I'm clear, so long as my words make sense to you, I don't want to speak differently. Because if you are born in another place, if a child is born right now in another country, where they speak in a different way, that's the accent they have. And I learned that from my kids. My kids don't speak like me at all. Why? Because the environment they are it's a different environment. So if you understand what I speak, how I speak, I communicate correctly, then I don't have to worry about my accent. I am actually proud of it, right? That's become an issue that has gone over time. So it's quite interesting to hear, and I really appreciate what I'm hearing from this panel.
I feel exactly the same. Thank you for saying that. Sorry, Mikaela, we haven't heard from you yet. I'm sorry.
No, I'm over here rallying for like English speakers with accents. Yes. My kids still make fun of me. I'm like, really, y'all? Stop it. But, I was thinking about what have I given up? So my story is different, right? I came here as an international student. from high school, really truly planning to just come, extract some education and go back home. Y'all, I was not trying to move to New Jersey. And yet here we are. It's been 20 odd years. What we do for love. But I was thinking about leaving behind a majority culture that looks like me. Like just the inherent privilege of seeing people who looked like me in all positions of power, in political power, financial power, economic power, all the way down to certainly the majority disenfranchised as well. And then coming here and making a conscious decision to really take on what is truly systemic racism in America and the building blocks of the country, first with the genocide of our native peoples, and then of course, the stealing of folks from the African continent, which I do share in my ancestry. So Jamaicans, the Taino were there, decimated by Columbus. Then we have our African folks taken, enslaved, etc. Those are my foreparents. But just choosing to kind of embrace that identity here, sometimes not having a choice, to be honest, but even noticing the assumptions, like Professor Angwenyi said, I echoed a lot of that. The assumptions people bring to you when you have a Black face. And then different things happen when they hear the accent. They might, like I said earlier, it goes to a positive experience. And so it's like, oh, you're not like them. Oh, yay. Tell me about, oh, I went to the beach. I've been to Ocho Rios. Or maybe it's a negative experience and you get that trajectory. But entering in, especially in these last few years, we know we were in the pandemic. Ellyn talked about things coming up for her experience. For us, like seeing the murder of George Floyd by police, that's like a whole thing. That's something that's definitely, it's in common with where I'm from, but it's different. Because here, I'm now identifying with a group of folks that, the Black experience is a marginalized one, it's a systemic racism one. To understand any group that has been oppressed in the United States, you have to start with some of those stories and understandings. So for me, I would say leaving behind one identity and then taking on or adopting or becoming unified with another. And also, as I mentioned, my husband's African-American, so my kids are too, as well as part Jamaican, but that is very much a reality. And then, of course, foisting them to Hopewell, where they, just by virtue of going to the school, I don't know, quintupled the number of Black students. But that's a thing, like we talk about a lot in our house too. So it's been very interesting.
That was great, Mikaela. Thank you so much for sharing those observations. I think that's really the question of sort of merging and so on. The things that I feel I've left behind are so minor compared to that. The beautiful English landscape, the lovely English beer, and believe it or not, English food, even though it's now much more accessible here. Anyway, I'm going to go back to Kat again. Kat, have we got anything that we think follows on with this question?
I really think that the questions that we have on deck already are really going to sort of push this conversation forward. So I'd like for us to continue with those. And
we're using up the time quite well here. Anyway, so on to question 3. The author and her family stay with Ma's sister in Hammond, Indiana. Their relatives had already been in America for 3 years and had clearly embraced some American culture. They seemed to be embarrassed by the ways that we and her family had not. So the question is, how much of your current identity derives from the country and culture that you and your family is from? And how much would you say is American?
Yes, I'll start.
All right.
I would say that as of this moment, I am pretty much very American. I've gone through many phases in my life, and I think many of us do. Again, I keep struggling thinking about other friends of mine with so many different backgrounds. I really don't think my experience is unique to being a first-generation American, though I think many first-generations Americans do struggle with, I guess, both parts of their identity. Their parents' part, and then the part where they're born. I mean, I've been born here and lived here all my life. How can I not be American in that way? I'm a child of the 80s and 90s, like Colby, and have all those TV references, song references commercial references that I don't know why they're stuck in my brain, but they come out. And so I very much have a lot of American pop culture in me. But I have to say that at the same time, I was raised very Vietnamese. My parents did not acculturate very well. My mother, unlike David, my mother was not proud of her accent, and she did not want to even speak English because she was just so ashamed of even opening her mouth to say something. I mean, so because my parents did not acculturate very well, I had to be more Vietnamese for them in order to relate to them. And they didn't want me to, they wanted me to blend in with everyone, but at the same time, their reticence to acculturate, all their friends were Vietnamese, meant that in order for me to feel like I could be close and understand them, just like T-Boy felt like she had to move closer to her parents, meant that I had to work so hard to, learn Vietnamese, to maintain that, and to listen to the music they listened to eat the food that they ate, because I felt that was the only way for me to really know them. And so when I stepped foot into my household, my parents' household, I am very Vietnamese, but you wouldn't know that from just knowing me every day at the library, or you wouldn't know that part of me, because otherwise I'm pretty American. But reading T-Boy's book, and then also our companion novel, The Sympathizer by Viet Thanh Nguyen, and his references to Vietnamese folk music, and just his mindset, his Vietnamese perspective, just really opened my eyes, because I don't normally expose myself to the Vietnamese American voice, even though that is my voice. So it's kind of eerie to me when I read it, because I'm like, wow, I can relate, I'm not the only one. And I feel oftentimes I'm the only one because I was raised as a minority, being that I was one of like a handful of Asian kids in my school, as opposed to, I have cousins who live in San Jose, California. And when I visit them, they were in a school of 90% Asian American kids. And for me, I felt odd that way because I wasn't around people who looked like me as much. So when I was surrounded by people who looked like me, I felt almost like my identity was subsumed or something. It was an odd feeling. But yeah, so I guess that answers the question.
So I'd like to just reflect on something. So the Statue of Liberty, what was that poem? Give me your tired,
Lady
your poor,
Lazarus.
your huddled mass.
Yeah, sorry.
Yes, right?
Yeah, Lady Lazarus. Yes,
yeah.
say it. Keep on going.
Right?
I'm sorry I interrupted.
Okay, so give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses, yearning to breathe free, the wretched refuse of your teeming shore. Send these, the homeless, tempest tossed to me. I lift my lamp beside the golden door. This country's greatness, well, I don't know, the country's greatness and true genius is within our diversity. And so when I think about what does it mean to be American, are we saying what does it mean to be a Caucasian American? What does it mean to be an American that subscribes to the Caucasian culture? Because when I think about America and when I think about my America, I think about the experiences that we all bring as immigrants. We are all immigrants here. The only true Native Americans are those Native Americans that were decimated by the people who immigrated here. And so when I hear that question, what I really hear is how white American do I feel? And what parts of that white American do I subscribe to? And I like to change the narrative to think about, what does it really mean to be American? It means to have an accent from your mother tongue. It means to enjoy all of these foods that we find in all these wonderful restaurants, from falafel to curry to sushi to all of these things. That is America. We are the great melting pot. And I think the sooner we're able to embrace that and recognize our history of what America was built on, it was built on the backs of slaves. It was built on the poor who came in, who built, by country, laid down the railroad tracks, right? This is who America is. And so I feel like as Americans, we need to celebrate our unique cultures that every new immigrant brings in. That's what makes us great. Sorry.
If I can follow up with what Ellyn said, because it's very much similar to the way I was thinking. It's interesting. One of the most attractive things about America, and for me that is fascinating, is the fact that you can find everything you want here from everywhere. That is very unique in itself. In other words, the thinking styles, the way people, I came in immediately and I could find even the type of food I want somewhere very close to where I am. And that is rare. You don't find that kind of thing. And I realized that the openness, this is interesting, the openness and genuine desire by Americans to find out who we are, the curiosity, that existed very much in my own culture when I came. Like my parents didn't go to school at all. They had but they told me a lot about America. And I came and found exact things that were telling me were true. So I was like, so there has to be this idea that the America, if we understand it in the really well, now, the way that I think Ellyn put it very well, the richness of the diversity of what makes America is the fact that you can find that differences that unite and bring the talents to make the best of the humanity. And that is not always existing in other places. But if you're only thinking about white America, then you're thinking about the idea that somebody is going to think they're superior than another. And that's the part where for a long time has been pushed on. Like when you're talking about America, you're thinking about how white are you or not. But the America itself, the true America itself, is what we're talking about here. The idea that you can be able to listen to another person that's very different and then find a way to decipher their language and where they are at, and then find commonality in it. That was I found very interesting. What I think, the other part that I think seems to be also confused is the idea of materialism and being possessive. I think that's the thing that I didn't have before I came to America, that right now I tend to have this idea of wanting to gratify what I call gadgets. The idea that the gadgets have to be new every time. You have to change one little thing and the whole thing is working, but you have to change to fit in. That is the other part of American that is not necessarily from my own culture, where in my the idea was that things belonged, like if I had something that was great, it can be able to serve others and make things better. So that's the part that I'm fighting with, that I think I'm now trying to struggle with, where did this idea of me wanting to always elevate to the next level when I can actually make things better for others come from? That's the part that I think probably it is with. Otherwise, America itself, for me, I think it's the diversity and the culture is so strong. And if we can get this story out to more people and make people feel comfortable who they are, really, and that's what I'm committed to do myself. And I like to speak more. I never used to speak more. I like to tell people that you need to be brave, and you need to confront things that you don't feel comfortable with by speaking openly and honestly. Because that's the American thing, is the truth. People speak very truthful and very honest, but we've come to agree that we can accept lies. That's not American. It's not wrong, because the culture we have is a culture where people can speak very openly, and that's what is the strength of the US in general. So I just thought of sharing that because I find it very fascinating.
I just have something very quick to say. Oh, am I on mute still?
No, you're fine.
I just have something very quick to say to this response, that I feel very American and I want to live in the America that we are creating right now.
Yeah, I just wanted to add into Kim's perspective, because I see Kim talking like my kids are talking, because exactly the same thing that, they've been born here, they've been raised here, and they call themselves American, but people seeing them outside, oh, where are you from? Are you originally from? And I mean, outside people, they are American, but as soon as they walk in my doors, not that I force my culture to them, but that's how it's. And with that, I can always relate to that. These kids are really caught up into your generation in between, the house culture is imposing something on them, and the society out there is imposing something on them, and they have to kind of stand strong what their beliefs are, and what, although it is a melting pot, it's like, I do feel them stretched on both the ends, that, do I follow this? Do I follow that? And to Professor Angwenyi's point and Ellyn's point is, sure, this is a melting pot, but at the same time, we have such a freedom to to kind of nurture your culture, like if you want to, like, you can follow your own religion if you want. That's the beauty of America. You can kind of get merged into the culture, the melting pot, but if you choose to keep it yourself, you still can have a freedom to do so. And I really love that part of it.
Mikaela?
Oh, Ellyn, were you going to say something? Oh, I just saw her.
Oh, no, it was just interesting. So Uma had been talking about her kids and King's experience. My kids are 5th generation. They're Hapa. They're Hapa Hali, half white, half Japanese. And they too struggle in terms of what culture that they want to, how they want to present.
Yeah.
They look Spanish. But it's just interesting. So it's an interesting dialogue.
Yeah.
And I think, when you talk about being American, first of all, echoing what everybody said about, America is what you make it, because inherently that is the nature of the American experiment. But also, I think for my little girls, there are 3 little Black girls, and I think about the importance of them really claiming and taking up their space as Americans, because there's a way that I've seen a lot of Caribbean immigrants, especially, folks of African descent from the West Indies, and maybe also West Africans. We sometimes silo ourselves in enclaves where we're trying to perpetuate back home. So it's like, forever you're Jamaican only, and Jamaican food, and Jamaica. And it's like, yes, and I need you to be okay with taking on the issues of the American experiment as your own. Like, you don't get to live here and be like, oh, this is not my issue because I'm really from here, because my grandma, like, no, this is your country. Like, these are your problems to fix now, sweeties. And look at how wonderful it is that they have a vice president who's half Jamaican. Like, there's precedent now for them, which is incredible. And so I want them to really embody that. And in terms of civics and like their social identity, to really take that on. So we talk about just even our public resources and the way public school works, and the fact that mommy pays way too many taxes, but we're gonna like hold our people accountable. When they saw Uma's name on the ballot, they were like, oh, we have to go vote. Like, it was a big deal, They really liked your campaign, but that to me is like important. I need them to really own where they are.
Absolutely, thank you. Thank you, Mikaela.
Uma, one of your campaign signs is still up. It's on Province Line Road and 518.
That's a violation. Thanks for letting me know. I'll make sure I pick that up.
This to me, this what you've all said is just really fascinating and really inspiring. And I realize, again, my own experience is so sort of, well, you're all unique, and mine is unique too. I mean, I still feel very, very English. I came here when I was 38, and you're pretty sort of set in your ways, I think, at some by that time. So I'll always be English, but on the other hand, there's much about this that reflects what you've been saying. And just to enlarge on my life a little bit, my daughter is from Peru. We adopted her when she was an infant, and she's now 30 years old, which I can't believe. But she had some of the experiences that you're talking about. How do I fit in the Hopewell Valley school system? There weren't many Hispanics when she was in the school system. I mean, she navigated it all very well, I think, but and now that she's a little older, she's really starting to process some of this. She's married to a wonderful guy who is half Mexican and half Costa Rican. And so we've acquired this fabulous Hispanic family, huge and loud and very, very fun. And so, these are experiences that we wouldn't have had in the UK. And so I agree with everybody that we have to, the tide is running in the right direction. I think that yes, the point about Caucasian is very, very valid. I mean, that's still the image of an American. You think of, I think, tend to still think of a Caucasian, even though they're rapidly becoming a minority, as we are rapidly becoming a minority. And that's bound to change. At least I mean, it must, and it will, and I hope it will. And that we can all, recognize the riches that we all have here. I'm surprised more people haven't mentioned food, actually, because food is the great uniting factor. We all try each other's food, even English food. It's a good thing. Anyway, I've talked too much. Okay, time's getting on. Wow. Kim, do you think we can keep going for a little bit?
I guess there are
Certainly.
2 questions. I
Everybody
think there
okay?
are 2 questions. Should we look at it? The 2 questions are there in the question answer, or
Okay.
should we address that later?
Yeah. Well, which we do. Well, why don't we get some input from? We don't have to do all these 4 questions. Why don't we get some input? So, Kat, can you give us a sense of some of the questions that we've had?
There is one question that I'd like to share that came from someone who apparently participated in the movie discussion Wednesday night. And it says, Kim, can you comment on hearing your parents' stories of Vietnam and how you internalize them?
Yes. I think I know what this question is in reference to, because we had a movie screening of the film Brooklyn last Wednesday about Irish immigrants. And there was a discussion about what home means to all of us. And here we were talking about being American, what American means, and just the idea of home. And the movie really portrayed really well how home is such a sensory, it's a sensory experience. And I think I had mentioned something to that effect about speaking of, talking about food, the smells that we grow up with, the sounds that we grow up with, and that to me is home, because I think as we navigate through the world as we get older, we're always seeking that feeling of home. We discover home in people, home in community. And for me, in terms of my original home, it's interesting because I had that when I stepped into my parents' home, it's always going back to this Vietnamese food and Vietnamese music. But what they created, as I realized as I got older, because I was so sheltered from the Asian American, Vietnamese American community that was, say, in California, what my parents created was almost a time capsule, a sensory experience of Vietnam for them before they left Vietnam that doesn't even exist anymore. Like when they went back to visit Vietnam, it wasn't there anymore. It was like this time capsule that I envisioned as home because that's what they created for me. And it's to the point, like when you're raised in that, all of us, our stories of our families, all those imagery we have, that we almost long for a home when our parents create those stories that we never even actually grew up in physically. It's this very odd longing sensation that I still have for this world that my parents grew up in that I will never be able to experience because it was just caught in that time in Vietnam.
Well, that's fascinating. Anybody else have a similar, any reaction to that question?
I think Colby does it so well, and you do it so well in your book, Colby, I feel.
Thank you. Well, tell me more, which part I can talk about.
Well, I think it's because you had mentioned how your grandmother is such a storyteller. And so I think you've taken her experiences, and because your book is prose, essentially poetry, you've captured the imagery of the stories your grandmother has told about how, her experiences in, I believe, France, right? I'm trying to keep everyone straight. I'm nearly
France and
halfway through
Greece.
your book.
France and Greece. Yeah. Keep reading.
I will.
It's beautiful, absolutely gorgeous. Like it drops you into that space.
You guys
Beautiful
are gonna
book.
make me cry. It's interesting. I really identified with what you were saying, Kim, about this nostalgia. I believe that the like for something you haven't experienced before. And actually there's a word in Portuguese, which I don't speak, but I've heard this word and it's always really resonated with me, which is saudade. Does anyone know this word? This nostalgia for something you've never experienced. And for me, this sense of place, I was actually born in Canada, raised partially in Utah, moved to Minnesota, moved to Boston, moved to Geneva, Switzerland, so I have no place. I have no place. And so for me, the home and the place was really in story. It was these stories from my family. And I'm a really emotional person, so I might get emotional when I talk about this, but for me, Tibui's book is about family trauma and about body and about what is contained in the stories of family. Can we, like those last pages of the book where her child is swimming underwater and she's like, how long are we going to carry the weight of this past? How can we move forward, and can I give my child the freedom to be their own person without the weight of our past? And that was such a huge search for me, because I think, I've been obsessed with this idea of epigenetics and like that we carry our families like pain and trauma in our actual cellular makeup, like our DNA. And the reason why I wrote this book was, do I have time to tell like one story? Is that okay, I'm going to just tell this story because it's kind of crazy. One of the reasons why I wrote this book was my daughter, Phoebe, got scarlet fever. And she was 6 and she had, we haven't had a night. It was like 4 o'clock in the morning. She woke up, had no fever. Then 45 minutes later had 105-degree fever, 104 plus fever. She was hallucinating. She dreamed that it was she said it was snowing in her room and a train full of children was coming to take her home. And in emergency calls to the doctor's office, emergency calls to the hospital, trying to figure out how we were going to care for her, what was happening. Anyone who's read the book knows that my great grandmother Jean lost a child to scarlet fever. And so like this moment of these like several hours, like I spent the whole entire time talking to my great grandmother, like she was in the room. And then all of a sudden I realized, like this is one family in different spaces, in different time periods, with like patterning and things that can be repeated. And it just gave me this like eon view of how the experiences in our family are carried, how they're processed, how place, how loss, how grief, how hope carries on through. And sometimes stories are not resolved in one generation. They continue and we carry them. And so like home is stories for me. And I keep on going back. My daughter's obsessed with Hamilton, so I keep on going back to the line in Hamilton of like, we live, we die, who tells our story? And I just loved hearing all your stories today. So I'm going to stop talking.
Yeah, that's probably a really good point to sort of kind of start winding up. We've gone over an hour and a half, which I think was the maximum, Kim, you thought we should do. So obviously we could go on doing this, for several more hours, I'm guessing, because we only did 3 of the 4 questions anyway. I just want to express my thanks to all of you. It's so enriching. I mean, I think this is the sad part, I think, about people who are clinging, maybe we should say, to the image of the Anglo-Saxon Caucasian America. I think they're missing out so much. That's what saddens me, really, that we have this great opportunity to learn about other people's lives and you know, in other cultures, as we tend to say. We should rejoice in it. I mean, absolutely rejoice in it. Probably, I think as David said, it's probably one of the, there are not that many countries that you can do this in. Canada's probably another one, and some others, but we're very fortunate to have this. So I just want to, you know, close out my comments by just saying thank you all so much, and for putting up being moderated by a Caucasian. It's very nice of you. Kim, do you want to sort of wrap us up here in any way, or say goodbye?
Yes.
Could I just say something really quickly?
Sure.
Yes.
So for everybody has a story, right? Every white, black, yellow, green, whatever, everybody has a story. And those stories need to be rejoiced because there's a common humanity, right? There's that common humanity that is in there. So I'm very pleased that you're moderating, Ian.
Beautifully said, Ellyn. I want to thank you all. As Ian said, we could go on for hours and hours as demonstrated today. And also when we rehearsed, we went on for, I think, just as much time. So I'm just so pleased. Again, I had mentioned that, you know, when I began this journey with the library board and the library community in having this big read, I did not anticipate that it would become so personal for me. I think several years ago, we had the book True Grit, which is a classic Western featured as our big read. And I thought, oh, this is fun. It brings the community together. And so this was a surprise to me, if not anything. And so I'm just so happy that all of you are here. And I wanted to thank the audience as well, the Hopewell Valley Historical Society, the Hopewell Museum, for everything, the Mercer County Library for hosting our in-person audience. Please stay tuned for more. Go to our website, check out, we have more programs that are big read related. I think the only program I'd like to really push right now is we have our closing program was a cultural fair, actually. And the cultural fair will be April 10th at St. Matthew's from 2 to 4, that's Sunday. And we are looking for exhibitors right now. We have, we've sent out a lot of social media messages asking, you know, if anyone knows anyone who would like to have a table to show some of your cultural artifacts. We'll have some performances. So if you know anyone, please, you know, feel free to reach out to me or head to our website to see how you can submit, because we just really hope to have as diverse of a group as possible. So.
Will there be food?
Yes, there will be. You can have. Yeah. You know, Ian, I sense that there's a theme in your comments. I could be wrong, but yes, people can bring food samples, individually wrapped food samples, and I hope this means, Ian, that you'll be there. All right.
I'll bring a Scotch egg. I bet you don't know what that is.
Yeah. Oh no, I don't. I'd also like to thank especially Kat Hogan. Kat, you are just, I don't even have words for Kat. She's like a superwoman for helping to bring all of us together and just being sort of my emotional, I guess, rock in this case. You know, whenever I had questions or felt like I had to work out thoughts about putting everything together, you know, I'd call Kat and talk to Kat, and, you know, I just feel so much better afterward. So thank you so much, Kat, for everything.
Thank you all. You all were amazing. I knew you would be. I have a relationship with every person on this panel, and I knew how remarkable each of you would be in sort of advancing this conversation. And I think as a broader community, we learned a lot by hearing from you today. And I think that even as folks who are, you know, not recent immigrants, I think there's a way that we can all find through lines in our own lives. So I am so grateful. This was lovely. And I just am so pleased that we had such a wonderful audience to be a part of this.
No. Yay. Thank you, everyone. And I hope everyone has a wonderful Sunday afternoon. The weather is getting warmer. I hear more birds outside, so please go out and enjoy yourselves. Have a wonderful spring day.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank
Bye.
you,
very
everybody.
much.
Thank you.
Thank
Really enjoyed the
you.
conversation. Thank you.
Thank you so much for everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye.